Good morning. We're learning as a schutzur for Shlema for Ilana Chaya Basarach. We're starting the new Mesechtas Menachos. Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Kol ha-Menachos shenikmetzu sheloi l'shmon ksheris el l'she'alu b'ayil b'shem chayva. The mincha has the same din as a zevach, as a carbon, that if it's brought sheloi l'shma, it's kosher, but it's not alu b'ayil b'shem chayva. The Mishnah uses the example of shenikmetzu, but later on in the Mishnah, we're going to see that it applies to all the four avodas of a mincha. Like we've said, we've mentioned numerous times, the avodah of a mincha parallels the avodah of a zevach. By a zevach you have shchita, and in the place of the shchita you have kmitza of a mincha. And then you have, instead of Kabbalah, of the dam in a klisharis that you have by a zevach, by a mincha you have nosam b'kli, you put it into a klisharis. You take the kaimitz and you put it into a klisharis. We have to make sure not to get confused. There's also the putting into a klisharis prior to bringing the mincha all together. You put all of the selis into klisharis to mekadesh it. This is after the kmitza, you take the kaimitz and you put it into a klisharis. Then this halacha, which is self-explanatory, is the same. And finally, haktara by a mincha is parallel to the nesinas dam of a zevach. When you take the kaimitz and you put it on the mizbech to burn. Okay, so, but the Mishnah uses the example of kaimitz, which is very similar to when we use the shchita in the Mishnah at the beginning of Zevachim. So we say that it says the same din, that if you do a kamitza, you do the avodah of a mincha shaloi l'shman, it's kosher v'le'olu l'bayil b'shem chayva. Chutz minchas chayta or minchas kenois, except for a minchas chayta and a minchas kenois, as we're going to see in a minute. These are going to parallel the chatas and the carbon pesach of by a zevach that we said. By those, it's not even kosher. It's not just le'olu b'ayim shem chayva, but it's entirely possible. So the minchas chayta, which is the mincha, if you remember when we had the carbon oil yared, the three averis that if a person does, he brings an adjustable, a variable chatas, and the cheapest, the most inexpensive type of chatas is the chatas where he brings the mincha if he's really, really poor, bedali dalis. So that minchas that's brought by a chayta, and a minchas kenois, which is a mincha that is brought by a saita, those are going to have the same thing, like we said, by a zevach of a chatas or a pesach, that it's not kosher at all. So if he does a minchas chayta or minchas kenois shalei l'shma, it's going to be entirely possible. And then the Mishnah explains that minchas chayta or minchas kenois, shekamson shaloi l'shman, if they did the kmitza shaloi l'shman, nosam b'kli, he did the nesina b'kli, the second avodah v'halach, did the halacha v'hiktir, or did the haktara, which is the fourth avodah, shaloi l'shman, if they did it entirely shaloi l'shman, oy l'shman v'shaloi l'shman, or shaloi l'shman v'l'shman, or if they did part of that avodah l'shman, and then the second part of that avodah shaloi l'shman, or vice versa, psulas. Any one of these cases, it's going to be possible. The Mishnah is just saying we're not machalik if you did the entire avodah shaloi l'shman, or if you did part of the avodah, the beginning of the avodah, meaning the kmitza, you started at shaloi l'shman and then you did it l'shman, or vice versa. In all these cases, as long as it was part of it was shaloi l'shman, it's going to be possible altogether. Ketzad l'shman v'shaloi l'shman. What does it mean when we give an example? The Mishnah gives an example of what does it mean to do a first lishman and then switch it to shaloi lishman. Remember, he's bringing, for example, a minchas chayta. So he starts it off l'shem minchas chayta, which is what he's actually bringing, or l'shem minchas nedava, and then he does the second part l'shem minchas nedava, shaloi lishman l'shem minchas nedava, l'shem minchas chayta. If he first has the machshava shaloi lishman, which is l'shem minchas nedava, a regular mincha, even though he's really bringing a minchas chayta, and then he switches the middle of the kmitza to a shem minchas chayta, that's lishman v'shaloi lishman, shaloi lishman v'lishman, And like we said in the Mishnah earlier, that's going to be possible. Zok the Gemara. Lama lila Mishnah Ella. What does it say? Kolaz hamanach hashem shalei shmuk shesh Ella shalei olu l'bayim b'shem chayva. Listni v'loy olu v'aloyas l'bayim b'shem chayva. Just say what the halacha is. Why are you saying it as a exception? We're saying a mincha that had a kamitza shaloi l'shman is kosher, but it's not olu l'bayim b'shem chayva. That's its ikar adin. The din is that it's kosher and it's loy olu l'bayim b'shem chayva. The reason why the Mishnah says this, and this should be familiar from Zvachim, Hakamash Malon, Labailam Hu Loy Olu Shem Chayva, Hamincha Gufa Kshera. Good morning. It's coming to tell just like this. If hopefully we remember Rava saying that when you do it when you do a mincha shaloi l'shma, just like a zevach shaloi l'shma, it's not going to be Oil L'Balam Shem Chayva, but it's kosher for also l'shnuya. And therefore, you're not allowed to continue having other machshavas shaloi l'shma. So we're 2 lines into the Gemara. So just to give you a quick recap, this Mishnah in the beginning of Menachos is very similar to the Mishnah in the beginning of Zvachim. And it tells you that if you bring a mincha shaloi l'shma, meaning that you say instead of it's supposed to be, we're going to see exactly what shaloi l'shma means, but Pashas it means he was supposed to bring a mincha that was an adava. A mincha could be a gift. And it says he has in mind, I want it to be a minchas chayta. So a minchas chayta is a machshava shaloi l'shma. It's not what he's really bringing here. So the Mishnah says it's le'ol l'balim l'shem chayva. However, the Mishnah makes the exception, just like we had the exception in Zvachim, that if you bring a chatas or a pesach shaloi l'shma, it's not just kosher v'le'ol l'balim l'shem chayva. It's entirely possible. So the same thing would be by minchas k'noyas and a minchas chayta. A minchas chayta would be if you have to do it shaloi l'shma, it's going to be entirely possible. It's not going to be just that it's a kosher carbon, but the bailim, the person who brings it, doesn't get the benefit that he wanted to get out of it, and he has to bring a new one. But it's going to be entirely possible. You're going to have to dispose of it as is, and that's all. So the Gemara says, why does the Mishnah use the lashon that a regular mincha that you brought did shaloi l'shma is kosher, but the bailim don't get a kapara from it? Let's say they promise to bring a mincha, they're going to have to bring another mincha. So it's coming to tell you like Rava. So that's what we're up to. Vashal shnuya k'de Rava on the Amar Rava oila sheshachta shaloi l'shma also lizugdama shaloi l'shma. Rava says Lagabi Zvachim. We had this on Daf Beis Amid Aleph in Zvachim that if you bring a carbon, a regular oila that you do shaloi l'shma is kosher v'le'ol l'bayim shem chayva. So Rava says that even though you brought the oila shaloi l'shma and you shechted it shaloi l'shma, you still have to do the rest of the avodah l'shma. You're not excused from bringing the rest of the carbon properly. And we brought 2 reasons for that. Iba yisei misvara, iba yisei makra. You could say this either from a svara, why Rava holds like this, or you could say it's from a pasuk. Iba yisei misvara, mishum de b'shani ba kol hani lishni lishani ba v'nezel. Since he made a mistake on one of these things, he should make a mistake. He changed things. He did a shaloi l'shma at the beginning. He should continue doing it incorrectly. So the Gemara says it's a svara. Why should he? Because he did something incorrectly. It's still a kosher carbon. Mehechatesa, he should go and make additional errors and do the rest of the carbon shaloi l'shma. Viba is saying makro, or I could say he learns out this from a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Moitzu chasecha tishma basisa kashenadarta l'Hashem alekecha nedava." The pasuk says, when someone says "Moitzu chasecha," with that which a person utters with his lips, tishma, he should watch, he should do as he said. Basisa kashenadarta. If he made a neder A neder is when he says, Harei alai, I want this, I'm being makabel on myself, let's say, to bring an oila, Hashem alekecha, and then he should do Nidava, he should do his Nidava that he said. So, in fact, the Gemara, Nidava neder who, Nidava neder who, why is it saying at the end of the Pasuk, he should bring the Nidava that he had sworn. We called at the beginning a neder, which is Harei alai, and then we end up with saying Nidava, that it's Harei zu, which is a different type of promise. So why is the pasuk changing the lashon? Karla neder v'karla nidava. Ella. So what it's coming to tell you? And kamashin adarta asisa yehei neder. If you do like you promised, kamashin adarta asisa. You said I'm going to bring an oila, and then when you bring the oila, you have in mind that it should be for an oila. Then it's a neder. Then it's going to be harei alai, and you're going to be with kaim. You're going to get your kapara. V'emlav yehei nedava. But if you don't do lishma, then it's going to be a nedava, and the rest you're going to have to. You're not going to get a kapara, and you're going to have to bring. It's going to be treated like a separate carbon that you brought just, and it's only going to be treated as this carbon. This animal is brought as a nedava, but it's not fulfilling your original neder. So nedava mishari l'shnuyaba. And even now that it becomes an adava, how can you change? Even though it's now an adava, you don't have a right to change an adava and have a machshava shalei lishma on it. So that's what we know. Even after you change, like Rava says, you can't change it anymore. Okay, till now, it's been really a copy of Zvachim. Now we're going to go a little bit in a different direction, where we're going to see a difference between a mincha and a zevach legabi the din of shalei lishma. So let's say that Rav Shimon disagrees with what we said in this Mishnah, that we said that machshava shalei lishma is going to be kosher v'le'ol ba'alam shem chayv. The Tanya, Rav Shimon Oimer, kol ha'menacha shenikmitzu shalei lishman, any mincha that a person does the kmitza shalei lishman, ksheris v'ol ba'alam l'shem chayv. It's kosher and it's all l'ba'alam l'shem chayv. It's treated as a fulfillment of the Bailam's requirement they're going to get a kapara. He disagrees with both things that we said in the Mishnah. First of all, it doesn't make a difference he's going to say this even by a minchas chayt or a minchas kenois, that any mincha that you bring, if you do it shaloi lishma, it's going to be kosher, and it's going to be alul l'baylam shem chayva. Why is that? She'ein ha-menachos daimis l'zvachim. Because Rav Shimon distinguishes between a mincha and a zevach, between our sugya that we had at the beginning of zvachim, what we said alul l'baylam shem chayva, le'alul l'baylam shem chayva, but it's kosher. He says minchas are different. She'hakoimetz machvas l'shum machashas. When someone has in mind, he's bringing a mincha. There's different types of minchas. There's different ways you can prepare the mincha. You can make the mincha machvas, which is like a thin fried mincha, and you could also bring a machashas, which is the thicker, like baked type of mincha. If someone's he promised he's going to bring a machvas, a thin mincha, and then when he's doing the kmitza, he has in mind l'shom machashas. Masam achicha l'shom machvas charev. What his mice is, when you look at what he's holding in his hand, it looks like a thin fried thing. So even though he's saying, I want it to be l'shem achashas, his actions belie his words. So we'll disregard what he says according to Rav Shimon. Since the nature of a mincha is that it can be determined what it is by looking at it, if someone does it, shalai l'shma, it's still going to be, we're going to disregard what he said, it's going to be fully kosher. It's going to be both kosher and alul l'baylam shem chayv. Similarly, chareva l'shem belula, if he does a dry mincha and he separated, he said, he was makadosh, he said, I'm bringing a dava, I'm bringing a dry mincha, and then he does, at the time that it's brought, the kayin says, he takes the kmitz and he says, I want it to be a belula, one that's mixed with oil. I say, you don't see any oil in it, so you know what he's saying is nonsense and you could disregard it. I say, you could see that it's a dry mincha. Zakr Shimon, Al v'zvacham enekein. By zvacham, this is not the case. Shchita achas l'kulan uzricha achas l'kulan. The shchita doesn't show what it is, and the zrika doesn't show what it is. If you have in mind something different than what you're doing has no indication. Kabbalah achas l'kulan, and there's one Kabbalah for all of them. Now, you have many questions. You say all kinds of different karbanas, right? You could bring some karbanas are male, some are female. There's some zrikas that have to be in one place, other zrikas have to be in another place. So the zrika achas l'kulan, Taisus and Rashi actually answers it, and Taisus disagrees with it. We'll look quickly at the Rashi. Zrika achas l'kulan. V'afagav diyesh matana achas v'yesh matan arba. There's some things that you do just one matana, the things that you need 4 matanas. Pirish b'kunshus etnan in nisni kula b'matana achas keeper. We've learned that if only one matana of we're doing the Taisus of Zrika achas l'kulan. So if you do a matana achas, you're yoitza. So even though the Torah says to do 4, when you do that one could be already yoitza, so it's not going to be enough kamina. Miukasha, danitten b'matan dalit and also shem nitten matana achas lirotzu. The masay mechichin k'shiyitin hashniya. As soon as you bring the second one, that should be a problem. It's one thing to say that, if you only did one, that could even be nasam matana arba, because you yaitza with just one. But the other way around, there's no way you would ever bring something that only needs one matana, that you'd bring 2 matanas on it. So he says, each one, if you look at it individually, it's not muchach that it's any different than the matana that you would give for the other one. And then there's other questions, right? That some l'mayla lamata, and the Gemara is going to address a bunch of questions about different ways you could have, that you would l'chayra be able to distinguish between different zvachim. But first, before we get back to that part of the Gemara, which is in the bottom, the Gemara asks a totally different problem. We have a problem with Rav Shimon. L'chayra Rav Shimon is not like our Mishnah. So now the Gemara is a little hard to follow, because the Gemara is going to talk about a stira in Rav Shimon himself. Why? We just said Rav Shimon holds shaloi l'shma by a mincha is going to be kosher because my sa'ah might fichan aleh. But there's a Mishnah later. There's a brisa of Rav Shimon where he says exactly the opposite, like we said in our Mishnah, that even by a mincha shaloi l'shma is going to be kosher v'le'ol, and there's going to be 3 terutzim for that. So we're going to get to that in a few lines, but before we get to that, the Gemara sort of presupposes that you know that history. So Zak the Gemara. Zak the Gemara. So we already asked a question over here, right? Rav Shimon is not like our Mishnah. So the emphasis the Gemara, ha-nichel Ravashi. We can understand, we can answer how the Mishnah, even though in the Mishnah we said that a mincha is kosher v'le'al shem chayva, and Rav Shimon said a mincha is always kosher. According to the way Rav Ashi is going to answer the stira and Rav Shimon, that there's going to be a stira between even this brisa, before we talk about our Mishnah, between this brisa that we said b'shem Rav Shimon and a brisa we're going to bring in a minute to Rav Shimon. So according to the way Rav Ashi answers that, the Amar kan b'chaymitz machvas l'shom macheshes, kan b'chaymitz minchas machvas l'shom minchas macheshes. He's going to answer that even though we see, like we said on the top, that Rav Shimon says that when you do a mincha shaloi l'shma, it's kosher, and we see later on that he says it's kosher v'lo alu b'ayil m'shem chayva. Rav Ashi answers that the way you're going to answer that stira is depends how it was said. If he said I'm doing this kmitza l'shum machbas or l'shum macheshes, that's stam nonsense. It's dvarim shel hevel to say I'm doing this l'shem machbas. Machbas means a thin wafer. You can't do something for l'shem, a type of mincha. You have to do a mincha. You have to be having in mind a mincha. It's like someone said, I'm doing this mincha l'shem a birthday cake. It doesn't mean anything. You have to do, I'm doing it l'shem a different kind of mincha, a mincha that's a machvas, or a mincha l'shem machashes. Now, we're going to, obviously this is problematic because Rav Shimon had said the reason why it's kosher is for a totally different reason. He said it's ma'aseh meichichin Allah. Now he's saying because the words don't have any meaning. But the Gemara will get to that on Daf Gimel. So if you say that, if you use this answer of Ashi's, so you could say Masnisan mincha l'shom minchahi. So you could say our Mishnah is talking about where he did the mincha l'shom mincha, and there Rav Shimon would be maskim that it's shaloi l'shema, which has a din that it's kosher v'lo alu l'baylam Hashem chayv. So that's the first error. It's el Rabba Rava ma'ika l'meima. But according to Rabba and Rava's terutzim that we're going to say in a minute, how are you going to answer? L'chayra, the Mishnah is not like Rav Shimon, and we don't want the Stam Mishnah not to be like Rav Shimon. V'chi tema k'dgamashani Rabba, as we're going to see, Rabba answers kambashini kodesh, kambashini bailam. That Rabba says when the person made a nafkamina of shinu kodesh, where he said changed it from, let's say, an oila, a nadava to a chayta, or to, so then that's what we say in the Mishnah. That's what we say in the Brisa. That Rav Shimon, it says it's going to be kosher, but by shinu bailim, where you can't, there's no way, there's no ma'aseh meichichin Allah of who the bailim is. That's where Rav Shimon says it's, the other way around. Kam b'shini kodesh, that our Mishnah is going to be talking about a case where he did shinui bailim, and therefore the shinui bailim is going to change it, that it's going to be kosher v'lo ola bailim shem chayva. And where did Rav Shimon say it's ma'aseh meichichin? It's by shinui kodesh. We changed what he was doing. Hamasisun shinui kodeshu. You can't say the Mishnah is shinui bailim. Diktani ketzad l'shma v'shelo l'shma l'shem minchas chayta l'shem minchas nedava. It said, it gives the example in the Mishnah of where he changed from a minchas chayta to a minchas nedava. So we're giving the example of the changing was not about who the bailam were, but rather minchas chayta. So you can't say that Rav Shimon is maskim that it's kosher by a minchas shalom by shinu bailam because the Mishnah said clearly it's talking about a shinu kodesh. The difference is whether he's doing a mincha l'shom mincha, and he holds that whenever you do a mincha l'shom mincha, it's always going to, then it's going to be fully kosher. He's going to learn from a pasuk that the Torah says, "Kachatas ka'asham." Well, actually, no, it's not from that pasuk. Zois Teres HaMincha, and the Zois Teres HaMincha means any lashon, any machshavas mincha is always going to be kosher. And therefore, our Mishnah, he would say, is talking about where he did a mincha l'shum zevach, and that's why it's kosher v'le'al ba'am shem chayba. But if he does a mincha l'shem mincha, then it's going to be fully kosher, like you said on the Bryce on the top of the Yamid. Hamasisa mincha l'shum mincha diktani. Like the same problem like we had in Rabbah, we have in Rava, that the Mishnah clearly said it's a question of mincha l'shem mincha. We're not going to have, only in Rav Ashi is his way of explaining the two brises, also a way of explaining that the Mishnah can be like Rav Shimon, but according to Rabbah and Rava, we're going to have to say the Mishnah is taka not like Rav Shimon. Okay, now, like I said, we're going a little backwards now. Now we're going to go back and see where you see the stira in Rav Shimon between the two brises. V'rami de Rav Shimon and Rav Shimon. The Tanya, Rav Shimon Omer, Kodesh Kadashim, he kechatas kasham. Kechatas u ka'asham. Yesh mehem kechatas, yesh mehem ka'asham. When the Torah describes a mincha, the Torah says that it's a mincha is Kodesh Kadashim, and it's like a chatas and it's like an asham. So there's some minchas that are like a chatas and some are like an asham. Minchas chayta harei kechatas. A minchas chayta is treated like chatzah. If it comes to shaloi lishma psula, kechatas is like a chatas that if you do it shaloi lishma, a chatas shaloi lishma is pasul. So to a minchas chayta, shaloi lishma is pasul. Minchas adava arei ka'asham, and a minchas adava is like an asham. If it comes to lishma kshera, uka'asham ma asham kasher ve'enim meratza, minchas adava kshera ve'enim meratza. It's going to have a minchas nedava is going to have the din like the asham, that a asham, even though we said it was a machlokes in zvachim, but we're going according to the man Amar that a asham is not like a chatas. A asham is like a oila, for example, that it's kasha v'loy alu l'bayim l'mashem chayva. So too, a minchas nedava is like an oila, it's like an asham that it's kasha v'loy alu l'bayim l'mashem chayva. So over here we see Rav Shimon is basically saying the din that we said in our Mishnah. He's saying this straightforward din that a mincha has a din shaloi lishma. If it's the special, a regular mincha shaloi lishma is kashav le'alu l'bayim shem chayva, but a mincha chayta is like a chatas that it's pasal and gansen, which again, like we said, is not like our brisa that we brought on the top of this amud, where Rav Shimon had said, because it's my sayam, and therefore it doesn't apply the whole question of shaloi lishma on a mincha. So Amar Rabba, so we're going to go through all the terutzim. Amar Rabba like kasha. The brises are not shver, kan b'shini kodesh, kan b'shini bayil. Now again, we have to keep in mind that the brisa is not exactly like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah said clearly it's talking about a case of shaloi lishma, of mincha l'shem mincha, where he wants to do one minchas chayta l'shem minchas nedava. The brisa just said, I'm sorry, this second brisa that we brought, so Shimon said it has the same dinim, but he didn't say b'dafka what the shina was. So Rabbi will say like kasha, kam b'shini kodesh, kam b'shini bayil. When did Rav Shimon say the first din? By Shini Bailam, he says that it's going to be in ganzen kosher, like he said on the top, Maseh Mechichan Aleh. Shini Bailam is not really Maseh Mechichan Aleh. We'll get to that later. But, and this second brisa that we brought on the bottom of the Yom is talking about Shini Kodesh, and on that's a standard Shini Kodesh, and on the Shini Kodesh, he's going to say that it's going to be.
Right? No, as we said before, now Shina Bailam would be that it's not kosher, that it's kosher, but it's not maratza, and Shina Kodesh would be completely good.
So it was the other way around. Is that right?
I would think so. No, as you said earlier, because
if I had said that earlier, then I got it backwards, right? Because we wanted to say, we said before, we can't say the teretz of Rava in the Mishnah, because the Mishnah said it's Shini Kodesh.
Right.
And we were trying to say the Mishnah is Shini Bailam, meaning the case in which you're going to have a din. It's Kasha B'Le'ol Shem Chayv is by Shini Bailam.
So Kasha V'Ein Elo is Shini Bailam, right? That's when it's not Maratza.
Let's see.
You're doing it for the wrong person.
Masisim is some Rav Shimon Kedvashani Rabba Lekaman Lotamei Rav Shimon. Kam b'shini kodesh, kam b'shini. Hada Amar Rav Shimon Alu b'shini kodesh. Right. He said it's alu, that it's entirely kosher is by shini kodesh. Koi minchas machos shem minchas machesh. The maseh mechicha shem kol. Va'adam aloy alu b'shini bailam. So the case of our Mishnah and this brisa, the second brisa over here is going to be shini bailam.
Over here, we're not really
talking about the top of the Yamid is going to be Shini Kodesh. I said it backwards before? Okay.
I'm not sure.
It doesn't surprise me one bit. There's a bunch of things flying around. I could very easily have said it incorrectly.
The Shini Bailam is no good. The Shini Kodesh is good. Completely good.
Right. The Shini Bailam is completely good. The Shini Bailam is going to have, it's going to be kosher.
Shini Bailam is not good.
Allah Bailam Hashem Chayava.
I'm so confused. Shina Bailam would not be good.
They're both not good. The question is how.
Meaning they're both.
The Shina Bailam is going to be kosher v'loy alu Bailam shem chayver. Masha enkein, the Shini Kodesh is going to be in ganzen kosher. it's not going to be puzzle at all. It's not even going to be
right.
loyal
Yeah.
Baal
All right, perfect. Yeah, now I got it. Perfect. Yeah.
Is that Mashiach from Shana Kodesh?
So that's the problem, is that Rav is saying a different svara. He's saying it's coming from a pasuk, and we said before the reason was because Maseh Mechichan Olah. The Gemara on Daf Gimel is going to ask that question: how do we square the way Rav Shimon said his reason and the way Rav is explaining the reason? Amalei Amalei Kasha Kambashini Kosh Kambashini Amalei Abaya Michti Machshava de Pasar Rachmana Hekeshehi Mali Shini Kodesh Mali Shini Bailam. We just said it's coming from the fact that the Torah says Kechatas Ka'asham, that we say that we learn out from Kechatas Ka'asham that it's going to have the din of Kashav Le'alu Ba'al Hashem Chayva. So why are you saying that if it's Shinu Bailam, that's not going to apply? You have a Hekesh that tells you the din. Amalei, so he says back, Maseh Mechichan Aleh, the Kamer of Shimon Svarahi. This din of Maseh Mechichan Aleh is not a kasha on a Hekesh, it's a Svara. The Shimon Darish time of the Kra. Machshava de Minchara Pasal Rachmana. Machshava de Minchara Loi Pasal Rachmana. Something that's Maseh Mechichan Aleh, I guess we're saying that Shinu Bailam is going to be a Maseh Mechichan Aleh. You're going to have to see how that is the case. So that's going to be, the Torah is going to say, did I skip over here?
No,
I didn't. Yeah, the Maseh Mechichan Aleh is going to tell you that it must be that the Torah never meant to say, even though we have a Hekesh, that it never meant to apply in the case where it's Maseh Mechila by Shina Bailam, and therefore it's going to be entirely kosher.
What does it mean that his Dorish time of the Quran? Who doesn't? Not being Dorish time.
So the question, it's a strange thing we're saying. We're saying you have a Hekesh, but we're saying because of a Svara, we're overriding the Hekesh. So he says it's only the case if you say that you look at why the Torah said that Shaloi Lishma is kosher. We say it's because when a person says does a Shaloi Lishma, one could possibly make a mistake. But if you can make a mistake, if it's clear from what you're doing, then that's not considered Shaloi Lishma. That's only, I guess it's a matter of degrees, right? Everyone, like you said, everyone is Derish time of the Kra. We look at the reasons for things. But Shimon has a more robust version of Derish time of the Kra, that we look at the reason of why something was imposed. And he says, therefore, since that reason that the Torah says Shaloi Lishma is kosher, but that's is because, if the person is recharacterizing the carbon, but if it's clear from his actions that his recharacterization is not going to be effective, we can disregard the recharacterization. If you hold your Dorish time of the Kra, you look more carefully at it. If you hold Eina, you're not Dorish time of the Kra, that means although his actions don't recharacterize, they're not effective in recharacterizing it. It's not effective in doing a Shaloi Lishma because everyone could see that what he's doing is not the case. It doesn't make a difference. The Torah said, there's a Hekesh that tells you that it's going to be, if it's Shaloi Lishma, it's going to be Loi Alu L'Bailam B'Shem Chayva. So it remains Loi Alu L'Bailam B'Shem Chayva in spite of our looking at the substance of what he did. Okay, I think we're going to have to stop over here for today. Beth Shem will continue tomorrow.
Right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Have a good day.